Do you ever wonder what happened to courtship and find yourself longing to go out on a real date? Do you ask yourself why some marriages last and others fall apart? Is your marriage struggling despite your best efforts to keep it together? Women who win at love don't have a gift you don't have. What makes them unique is that they aren't at war with the men in their lives. Rather than take a competitive approach to relationships, as the culture teaches, they accept that men are men and that women are women. And that makes all the difference. Whether you're single and mapping out your life, or you're divorced or unhappily married, women who win at love will permanently alter the way you view men in marriage. You will learn the 8 dating rules that lead to marriage, why super successful women struggle in love, what men want and what women want. Hint, they're not the same. Why love alone is not a reason to get married, how to avoid the green grass syndrome, and why acting like a man lands women in a ditch. Women Who Win at Love is an in-depth examination of modern dating and marriage and a wake-up call for women at every stage of life. So go to Amazon.com and type in Women Who Win at Love and get ready for your life to change. Welcome to another edition of the Suzanne Venker Show, where we tell truths the culture won't. You can find out more at SuzanneVenker.com. And as always, this program is brought to you by Hair Saloon for Men. Hair Saloon is filling a void in American life that has as much to do with the restoration of men as it does with the business of hair cutting. Men and women are different, and that's a good thing. At Hair Saloon, the TVs are always tuned into sports and never to Oprah. So head on over to hairsaloon.com. They have 18 locations in St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Boston, and Houston. Book online or through their mobile app. Again, that's hairsaloon.com for men against the grain. Our culture is so saturated in feminist ideology that even conservatives think inside its wheel ruts. This wouldn't be a problem except feminism is antithetical to human flourishing because it has a false view of human nature. The stark difference between men and women when it comes to mate selection and family planning is just one example. Women have the most marital bargaining power in their 20s. The smartest female strategy, then, is to lock in a husband before women have to compete against younger, more fertile women. This is the exact opposite of what our society tells women to do. It tells women to do the same thing men do. But women are not men. Our bodies are different, our fertility is different, and our priorities are different. Indeed, infertility problems increase and are harder to address the older you are. That boyfriend you passed on at age 25 because you, quote, weren't ready to get married yet, end quote, won't be around when you're 30 or 35, and the replacements for him are slimming out at that age. All of which is to say, women need and deserve their own life script, one that's unique to their biology. In order to develop one, they need to be told the truth about not just their bodies, but about what makes most women happy. My guest today is Joy Pullmann, author and executive editor at The Federalist, as well as the mother of 5 children. Joy explains why the feminist life script that encourages women to postpone marriage and motherhood indefinitely is not only bad for women, but not what most women want. She also tells her own story about how she got lucky with an unintended and unplanned pregnancy. Joy joins us now via Skype. Welcome, Joy.
Hi there. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us. So I wanted to point it out right away that most of what
you're one of my favorite lady writers. So I just couldn't believe that you even asked.
Oh, please. You're awesome. You're just great. And I got to tell everybody right away, if you don't know who Joy is, again, she's the executive editor at The Federalist. And what I love about her writing is that you have a way of putting in layman's terms pretty, some complicated stuff that people wouldn't necessarily understand, but you put it very simply and in a way that makes sense. And that's been what's really stood out to me about your work. So thank you, though, for your comment. I want to point out at the outset that most of what I just read comes from an article you wrote at The Federalist called "The Feminist Life Script Has Made Many Women Miserable. Don't Let It Sucker You," which is right up my alley, as will not surprise you. And I'd love to start by having you share with my listeners your story about getting pregnant as a new wife when you had some other plans in mind, immediate plans in mind, and how that changed not just your trajectory, but maybe the way you think about issues related to careers and family.
Well, I mean, as I write in the article, I was surprised by many things about getting pregnant when I didn't want to. And in retrospect, one of the surprising things is that I thought, why did I assume that I wouldn't get pregnant when I was having sex, right? Now that I am an older and wiser lady, I realize, how kind of clueless that is. But it's a really common assumption. And that wasn't the only clueless common assumption that I had somehow absorbed from the culture. And it actually really made my first pregnancy very psychologically difficult. Physically, it was great. I was pregnant at 22. And as I write in the article, I was lucky enough to be married, so I had, a support system behind me. I had I wasn't going to be a single mom. The baby and I were going to be fed. We had health care. All of that was fine. So, so in terms of just, financial stability, relational stability, as well as that my body handled the pregnancy really great because I was so young. All of that was great. But what was not great was my mentality about the pregnancy. It was, my roughest one. And as you mentioned, I have 5 kids and they're all pretty young. I'm still pretty young, actually, but I'm really grateful about that also in retrospect. But it was psychologically difficult because I had somehow, even though I grew up in a really conservative, my parents are both politically and religiously extremely conservative. And so, I grew up in that kind of culture and I thought that I was also, tended towards that way. But somehow, I think just because it is our cultural, the water that we're swimming in, I had absorbed completely non-conservative, religiously and political ideas about what my life trajectory was supposed to look like. And nobody had told me anything about the biological differences between women and the psychological differences. I knew, I'd read things like, the women are from Venus, men are from Mars, women are from Venus kind of thing. But I didn't realize how fundamental and how deeply affecting our biology and our sex differences are. And of course, I think marriage is designed to help you learn a lot more about that. That's anyway. So when we're just 3 months married when we got pregnant. So we didn't have a lot of time to explore that dynamic that much before the baby came. But it's been almost 10 years now. So I've learned a lot more about that in the intervening years. And so I really appreciated that part about marriage as well. Anyway, but I was a very pro-life person. So I had to confront the fact that my pro-life convictions were completely out of step with the way that I was feeling about my own baby. And I had a huge moral dilemma about the fact that I was angry at my own child, an innocent, defenseless person. And I knew it was a person. I knew it was my child. And I wanted to love this child, but I was angry that, that the child existed. So that was a difficult pregnancy. But it started, I've written about this elsewhere, but it also really rescued me from a lot of harmful ideas that I had absorbed, and kind of slowly started this process of transforming my life into one that isn't negative, that doesn't lead me to, dislike and hate small, innocent, defenseless children that belong to me. So when I saw that that was the outcome of these assumptions that I had, I knew I had to change them, and it required me to change them. And that is ongoing. I still have work to do in that area, but I'm very, very, very grateful for that, what it has done, what my son and my husband and, the rest of my kids have done for my life and making me such a better person. And I'm sure that will continue, but anyway, it's been wonderful. So I've been really blessed, but I didn't at the beginning. I really thought it was one of the most horrible things that could ever have happened to me, but it turned out to be exactly the opposite.
I just think this is fascinating. I didn't realize the scope of this. So let's just to be clear with our listeners, what you're saying essentially is that you had other plans, right, after you were married. And that's what you mean by being resentful, correct?
So I came out of college, top A student, honors program, had a bunch of internships. I was going to go take on the world, kick tail, take names, I had multiple job offers coming out of college at a time. I came out of college right at the height of the Obama recession, so I was heading to Washington, D.C., to make a name for myself, la, 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 la. And this baby was going to ruin everything, I thought. So that, it was a major conflict. And I was really headed into career mode, career lady. And, I thought that the baby was going to destroy all of that. So it turns out that he transformed that into something way better than I ever would have, as well as, now I look back and I think, what would be the point of, having a byline at somewhere like the Federalist, or getting to go on radio programs with you, and other people? That would be completely meaningless if I did not have my son. If I had aborted him, if I had rejected him and stuck him in daycare, which we didn't choose to, I just feel like my moral character was shown to be very bad, but I improved it when I could have, accentuated my bad character instead. So anyway,
I don't know that I'd call it
of having a prominent place somewhere if you don't have integrity in your private life, and the people that you love are not feeling loved by you. So, but I knew none of this. I was a complete neophyte when I was walking into it, and I've learned it only through going through it.
This is so interesting. It's interesting that you refer to having bad character. It sounds like to me what you're saying is this is especially interesting because you came from such a traditional background. It sounds to me like there was a disconnect between what you were born and raised to believe and what the culture was teaching you, which I happen to think. I just had a conversation yesterday with someone about trying to explain the significance of the culture, and we're going to have to go to a break right now. But when we come back, I want to talk about that, how much more significant the culture is, I think, than people realize on these very personal life decisions.
You're a man that respects quality over quantity. You value relationships that can stand the test of time. You enjoy convenience without sacrificing comfort. At Hair Saloon for Men, we get it. We're restoring the time-honored tradition of delivering a haircut experience men across all generations can depend on. Because sometimes the man everyone depends on needs a place of his own to depend on. The experience goes well beyond the haircut. With every perfect haircut service, you receive a complimentary beverage, a relaxing shampoo, a hot towel and mint for the perfect finish, and remember to take advantage of the complimentary shoe shines. While today's world is filled with numerous clip joints and fancy salons, Hair Saloon is building something better, something different. Book appointments online 24/7, and walk-ins are always welcome. Hair Saloon, for men against the grain. Visit hairsaloon.com to find a saloon in your neighborhood or for franchising opportunities. That's hairsaloon.com.
Welcome back to the Suzanne Venker Show. You can find out more at suzannevenker.com. We're talking today with Joy Pullmann, author and executive editor at The Federalist, as well as the mother of 5 children, about how women set themselves up for failure by following the feminist life script. And we left to go to break talking about Joy's, I guess you'd call it epiphany, in getting pregnant as a newly married mother prior to when she had planned to do that, and how it really shifted everything for her in terms of what she valued and how she looked at things, particularly with respect to work and family. So I was mentioning before we went to the break that I just feel so strongly about the cultural messages that women, even from, as you were putting out, conservative or religious backgrounds, are absorbing that basically end up superseding the values that they were raised with. Mm-hmm. I find this fascinating because, and to me it makes perfect sense, because when people don't really understand, I think, what we're talking about when we talk about the culture, it's that drip, drip feed, whether it's commercials or a song or music or what your friends are doing. We are such we're social animals that want to be confirmed by those around us. And when we see them all doing something, it is just so natural to want to jump on board with that. So is that what you feel like in retrospect you were up against?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, one of the shocking things about this whole experience I'm talking about is I was shocked by the fact that I, like I said, an extremely strong pro-life person, held implicit anti-life, thoughts, that caused me to have that kind of conflict about my own child. And I mean, that wasn't the only one, but that's obviously perhaps one of the clearest ones. And like you're saying, I mean, when I say I grew up in a conservative house, we didn't watch TV. We didn't even have our television set hooked up, so I wasn't like watching sitcoms. I wasn't watching soap operas, whatever, serials, whatever it is that people watch. I was getting very limited cultural messages compared to the average person, who does. We didn't listen to a lot of pop radio. My parents would, turn on NPR, but it's on NPR as well, right on the news,
right,
and the talk,
right,
stations. But so it was kind of shocking to me to see that the effect to which it had affected me when I had thought that I was such a strong person who really, believed my ideals all the way through. And yet I found out that I really wasn't, I actually didn't. I needed to be, I needed to have more of my thoughts come into alignment with my values. And that was a difficult process, but it was a really good one for me.
Awesome. Okay. So let's get into the specifics of your article where we're really honed in on women's fertility. You give an example from The Cuts, which is a advice column from
New York Magazine, I think.
Yes,
blog.
Right. Right. And this 35-year-old woman wrote in, and she's in great distress, you said, over this fact that she had bought into this idea that you should postpone marriage and motherhood and go out and have this great, fun life unencumbered by any responsibilities, and that's just what you do. And then, of course, here she is, 35, regretting this and saying that she's left most of her friends behind, and they've continued to – her friends have grown deep roots, in terms of marriage and home ownership and all of that. And now she's miserable. And then you pointed out in there that the advice columnist that this woman wrote to gave her the, the psychobabble, let's call it that, to make her feel better, but didn't recognize or validate this woman's loss. So let's talk about what that loss is, that at 35, what happens and why this is so critical to understand.
And of course, I knew none of this. I knew almost nothing that is important, about my life. Nobody ever told me any of this. So, I didn't learn this until maybe like pregnancy 2 or 3, right? Not even with my first pregnancy. And I went to all the doctor appointments and I had very great health care. Anyway, but nobody told me just the basic thing that starting at age 35, medical professionals, well, if you're pregnant 35 or later, you're classified as a high-risk pregnancy just because it's harder on those aging women's bodies to have babies. You would people nowadays think, 35, you're just getting started or whatever, but that's just not the case physically, especially for this very big task of creating a human being inside yourself. So you're just at an increased risk for complications starting at that. And if you look at the charts about fertility and pregnancy complications and, the birth defects with babies, it just kind of starts to tip around 35 and then it takes just a straight line downward, basically straight until menopause, which is about, early mid 40s. So, I didn't even know none of that. Now that I know that, I've been thinking, oh my goodness, I better get all the babies that I want in before 35 if I can. Because the more that I have, the more that I want. It's kind of like, got to collect them all.
Well, so do the math for us, because you were talking in there about how, you need to rest between these pregnancies. So mapping out how many you want.
Nobody tells anybody that either, but it makes perfect sense, right? Everyone knows it takes 9 months to gestate a baby, but, there's postpartum period. Your body is recovering for the next year. You're nursing the baby. You're bonding with that baby. So it's at least a 2.5, 3 year cycle to create, to nurture, to get, on their feet, one baby. So, 86% of Americans want to have at least 2 kids. So that's like, that's a 5 or 6 year proposition right there. It's going to take them 5 or 6 years to create those babies, to recover from those babies, to start the next one, so on and so forth. So if you don't, and the average age of marriage nowadays for ladies, I think is 28 for women, and or maybe 27 for women and 29 for men. It might have inched upward again, but that was the last that I saw. So, and when people get married nowadays at the age, they are not thinking, wow, I had better, if I want to get my 2 or 3 kids, I need to start right now, because they do. If you're on that time horizon, it's going to take you 5 to 7 years, 5 to 8 years to get 2 or 3 kids. So, simple math, 28 plus 5, 28 plus 8, there you are. You're barely getting them in right before that high-risk pregnancy kind of stage starts. And those are those are basic biological facts that nobody ever communicated to me. I had to put two and together, hearing, oh, whoa, wait, at 35, I'm going to have to do all these extra tests, when I'm pregnant that I haven't had to do, since I was lucky to be pregnant earlier. I'm going to have, increased possibility of a C-section, which is a major surgery that really affects your recovery and your bonding with the baby, and it's just, kind of a, rolling snowball from there. So that's just I think that should be taught, to girls and young women in their sex ed classes in middle school and later. But obviously, basically nobody is telling them that sort of thing.
No, they're not. And of course, we're up against something a lot bigger here. You gave an example, again, of another woman, this one's 50, who called into Dennis Prager's radio show, and I actually quoted that same thing, so I remembered it, where she also, postponed, just like the other lady, postponed marriage and motherhood as long as possible. But her reasoning, she said, was that she was programmed to get into the workforce, compete with men, and make money, because that would supposedly be a fulfilling life. But she was told that by a feminist mother who was divorced, and she said, who, quote unquote, hated her husband, my father. Now, that's not a small thing, and it's not a rare thing. This being a product of divorce naturally scares people into thinking that marriage is not a tenable situation. And so, of course, you're going to push that off. So in conjunction with the fertility issues, you also have this very negative, really, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, ultimately, I think, for a lot of people, because they just are setting themselves up to fail by not understanding that their parent's story doesn't have to be theirs. Mm-hmm. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Well, that's a really difficult question. I think maybe a lot of your listeners don't know, but the majority of millennials, I'm a younger millennial, are now having kids. The majority of them have kids without being married. And even if you don't want to talk about that in terms of morality, you have to realize that is putting those kids at risk. Every single sociological indicator says that being, in a home with their own married biological parents is the number one best way to raise a child. And so if you're not doing that, you're setting them up for failure. And a lot of millennials have known that because, we have boomer parents, largely, and our boomer parents are very selfish, very me-centered, and that has led to, a very large boomer divorce rate. So we do feel psychologically scarred by that. I just know, talking to young people of my age range, it comes up either implicitly or we will, many will just acknowledge it straight up. I don't want to have the same kind of family life that my parents had. Mm-hmm. It was tense. I felt torn between these two people. I was forced to be the go-between. But the problem is that, cohabitation is basically like starting, your relationship divorced because the majority of cohabiting relationships do not last. No. And, so what you're doing is creating an environment for kids that you said you were trying to get away from. But again, nobody's telling anybody that. They don't know. They're just, trying to figure it out on their own with so little guidance.
Completely agreed. I have to stop you right there. We need to take a quick break now and hear a word from our sponsor.
Hair Saloon. It's more than just a haircut. You walk in the door, tired, spent, looking a bit ragged. You're greeted by a warm welcome like you've been here before. A complimentary drink slides across the bar, quenching your thirst for comfort and convenience. The sound of clippers and conversation can be heard, drowning out the noise of the world. You sit comfortably, surrounded in soft leather and smooth chrome. The smell of oak and Clubman talc reconnects you to traditions your father and grandfather once knew. The soothing sounds of sharp metal trim away at your problems. Staying put in the comfortable barber chair, you lay back, resting your eyes as warm water and sweet mint soap washes away your worries. You recapture a few minutes to feel strong again, to look your best, and to get ready for what's next. And you're ready to repeat again a few weeks later. Hair Saloon, for men against the grain. Visit hairsaloon.com to find a location near you. That's hairsaloon.com.
Welcome back to the Suzanne Venker Show. You can find out more at suzannevenker.com. This program is brought to you by Hair Saloon for Men. At Hair Saloon, customers receive a complimentary hot or cold beverage, as well as a shoe shine, hot towel, and mint. At Hair Saloon, they don't offer coupons because they don't need to. Their prices are always reasonable, and customers never feel shortchanged when they walk out the door. So head on over to hairsaloon.com. They have 18 locations in St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Boston, and Houston. Book online or through their mobile app. Again, that's hairsaloon.com. We're talking today with Joy Pullmann, author and executive editor at The Federalist, as well as the mother of 5, about how women set themselves up for failure following the feminist life script. So we left off talking about how Joy, as a mother of 5, has women who sort of stop her when she's out and about with her kids to tell her what a beautiful family she has and how they wish they had had more kids and all of that. I think that is just, I couldn't agree with you more that is a hush-hush almost. I mean, it's a big deal, and people do not hear enough about how differently life looks when you're hitting the 45 mark. I'm 51, so I'm feeling it now. Like, even when I look back, I have 2 children, and yeah, I wish we had more, but I kind of messed it up the first time, and then by the time I remarried the second time, we were older, my husband and I. Are you there? I'm here, but I'm hearing a car in the background or something, so I'm not sure what that was. So my producer and I are sitting here laughing. Okay, back on track. Sorry, guys. Just that it looks very different when you get to be around my age and you look back and you see that those years are gone. And if you hadn't understood and embraced how you're going to feel about it down the road, you are very likely going to be disappointed. So it is very unfortunate. And in the article that we're talking about that you wrote, in terms of planning this out and understanding the differences between men and women, which I want to get back to, one of the points that you're making is, look, men and women are different. Women have a biological clock, bottom line. Men don't have, they do sort of, but not at all the same. And
clock is a lot longer.
Much longer. And look, we can't do anything about that. This is nature. This is God. We don't make these arrangements. So we're stuck with them. So knowing that, one of the things in the book that I have coming out later this year is, talks about mate selection, and when men and women are at their most attractive. And for women, it's when they're young and they're fertile, and they're getting messages to just basically ignore that time of their life and do something else, and thinking that 10 years down the road you're still going to be in the same position that you were in your mid-20s, and it just doesn't work that way.
Right. Well, and the thing I've started to think, I mean, again, this has been a really long and slow process, right? So, which is probably good for my psyche. Can't make big giant changes too fast, or it'll be destabilizing enough to make them at all. So one of the things that, I actually switched around baby number 3 to, the first 2 and almost 3 were kind of like, wow, okay, that happened. I wasn't really doing that. And then actually number 4 and number 5, I did that on purpose. I wanted those are planned pregnancies, which sounds crazy. But I changed my mentality into thinking, well, how many kids will I want to have when I'm 40 or 50? Well, the honest answer to that is as many as humanly possible, right? Because there's zero downside and all upside. It means more people at the Thanksgiving dinner table. It means more grandkids. It means, more, photos for my Facebook. It means more, opportunities to play and stay young, and goof off with a crop of these, wonderful people. It means more opportunities to love people. Like, I just can't see any downside. It's more people when I'm 80 years old and I can't think straight anymore because I'm 80. More people who can drive me to my doctor appointments and hold my hand and check that those nurses are getting my meds right. That's really, really important to your quality of life. And a lot of people at that, and we're talking about, I think the average age that women live too long is mid to late 80s. You are setting the second half of your life in the first half of your life, and you don't even know it. And your kids, your family life is immensely important to your happiness, your mental health, when in that second half of your life. So again, chalk that up to one of the extremely important things that nobody's telling these young people. Right. There was actually, I forget the name of the lady who wrote Sex and the City that inspired the obviously the big hugely successful TV show. But she just recently came out. She's hitting her 50s now, childless, divorced. She says, I regret not having any kids. I basically have my girlfriends just like it is in her TV show. And, the quotes from her in the article were so sad. We just go around and we're still having brunch. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we mix it up and have it on a paddle boat, but I mean, if that, how do you say, 80 years of having brunch with your girlfriends, it's going to get a little old, but you don't know that when you're 30 and it's still kind of fresh and fun.
No, and what's standing out to me about what you're saying, of course, is the difference between what the way you're talking, and I think the average millennial, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a millennial, but is that you're thinking into the future. You're thinking far ahead. And that's really the ticket. That's the trick to this whole thing. Because if you're only thinking about the tomorrow or a year from now or 5 years from now, you're missing out on understanding what's going to happen in the second half of your life. So I don't think that that's popular to talk about in the way that you are. I understand exactly what you're saying, but I don't think that it's popular to talk about your life in this long, journey or road. But we need to do that when it comes to work and family and fertility issues, obviously. We need to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Are you unhappily single? Does your marriage or relationship feel hard? I get a lot of emails from readers who are struggling in their marriage or relationship. Unfortunately, the help an individual or couple needs can rarely be answered in a series of emails. For this reason, I offer relationship coaching for those who are struggling to find love and for couples whose marriage or relationship feels stuck in a negative cycle. Go to SuzanneVenker.com and sign up today for a coaching session with me and learn the tools you need to find love and sustain it. It's so much easier than you think. That's SuzanneVenker.com. Welcome back to the Suzanne Venker Show. You can find out more at SuzanneVenker.com. We're talking today with Joy Pullmann, author and executive editor at The Federalist, as well as the mother of 5, about how women set themselves up for failure by following the feminist life script. And Joy, I want to pick up by basically summing this up to say what I always try to encourage and emphasize is it's just the best strategy for these issues with women and work and family and fertility and marriage and all of that is to move with the biological tide rather than against it. And so one of the things, and I know you agree.
Right, and I mean, the reason that I go and I just try to get these points in or try to communicate them more and talk about them is that because I wish so much that someone had told me this.
Right.
Even though I got really lucky with my unwanted pregnancy at the great biological time. I mean, that baby was so easy. Like I've talked, to lots of women now about their different kinds of pregnancies. And it's ridiculous how easy, babies at 22, 23, 25 are compared to babies at, my last one was at 32.
Yes.
Major world of difference. And just because, my body is young, it's not, I was wearing my pre-pregnancy pants at 4 weeks postpartum. It was great.
They're just,
there's just so many huge benefits about that, but nobody told me a darn thing about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I just try to get the word out because it really would have helped me, even though I got lucky. I wouldn't have got lucky if my birth control worked better. And look, anyway, but not only that, I wish someone had told me that so that I could have chosen to do it, myself and then been spared a lot of the grief and realized how great it was going to be. Because I had all of these fears about how terrible it was going to be. All of my resistance to kids and to marriage. I was very scared to get married. All of that resistance was utterly fear-based. I was terrified of both of them. And now having done it all, it's wonderful. Obviously hard work, right? It's not easy, but it's so rewarding. Absolutely would do it 100 times over again. And I would be way more happier about it. So if anyone had ever done this for me, I would have been so grateful, which is why I try to kind of pass that on.
Well, I think that's great. And I want to shift now to something that you said, a sentence that you wrote in this article where you said, there is no going back after having a baby in any sense. And that's so huge because obviously your world changes so dramatically that one of the things that I think surprises people like you're talking about is also the fact that, hey, they want to be with their babies when they have them, which is not the message they got pre-baby.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And so I want to shift just a little bit to maybe next year in 2020 because we're going to have a Democratic push, certainly, for universal daycare. They don't call it daycare anymore. They soften that with childcare.
It's that word because they know what it is.
Yes, right. So, and I know you've written a lot about this. So tell my listeners what the disconnect is between what they're pushing for and what most women want based on this research?
So honestly, I feel like a lot of people who talk about this issue don't have kids or didn't really care for physically. I don't mean they don't love their kids, but they didn't physically care for their kids very much because
I totally agree.
Just the things that they will say sound like someone who doesn't have any experience with a small infant.
Couldn't agree more.
And so that's really frustrating to me to say basically like, you don't even know what a baby is like, do you? I mean, you sound like you don't know what a baby is like. And again, I didn't know what a baby was like until I got one. I mean, I had, done some babysitting. I have a bunch of younger siblings, but it's completely different when it's your own, and it's primal. You cannot, I mean, it's kind of like if your readers are familiar with the C.S. Lewis novel about the wood between the worlds. So this is a children's novel, the Narnia series, but it's a science fiction book. He describes the kind of this place where if it's a wood with a bunch of pools in it. And if you jump into the pool, you're transported to a completely different world, that has different rules, different characters, different settings, so on and so forth. So for me, becoming a mother was like jumping into one of those pools. I had never been to this world before. It was a completely brand new place, and it was a kind of a universe of possibility that I never knew had existed. And I couldn't have ever conceptualized that until it happened. It's just kind of one of those things, you just got to do it to understand it on that gut level to really get it. So that's one thing that I want to communicate to people who don't have kids. You really have to do it to get it on the gut level. But I mean, we're biologically primed to be strongly attached and strongly favored to our helpless little children, and it's instinctive. You typically, unless in the rare cases, when you're having certain problems, maybe biochemical imbalances, you have an abusive relationship, but those are rare instances. For most normal people, when you get that baby out, you all of a sudden are complete. The literature on it, actually, the same hormones, the bonding hormones are the same one as falling in love. Yep. You fall in love with your baby. Yep. Anyway, so you fall in love with that baby, and you want to be with that baby, and you're attached to this baby, and you would do anything. You would jump in front of a bus for that baby. And so that primal feeling is nowhere considered. I get mad at people from both parties about this, because I see all these Republicans stand up, and it's like, did you have a baby? Did your wife have a baby? And would you want to take that baby and stick it with a stranger at 6 weeks old? Really? I went back to work when my first child was 6 weeks old. But my husband and I were really lucky to have an arrangement where we both of our workplaces were flexible. So the baby was in our care 24/7. It was either my husband or me. I was able to work from home a significant portion of the week, and I had him all the nights and the weekends. So I had the baby in my arms, and he wanted that. Our baby, and that's the other thing. The babies want their mom so bad. I have taken care, of kids whose mommies have to work, and they ask me all day long, when's my mom coming home? Or when they, skin their knee, they cry, I want my mommy. And you can't blame them. They deserve their mommy. They need their mommy.
Absolutely.
And, everybody's kid is the same.
Agreed. Joy, I need to stop you right there for a second, because I got to go to a break. We'll come right back and pick up exactly where we left off. Do you ever wonder what happened to courtship and find yourself longing to go out on a real date? Do you ask yourself why some marriages last and others fall apart? Is your marriage struggling despite your best efforts to keep it together? Women who win at love don't have a gift you don't have. What makes them unique is that they aren't at war with the men in their lives. Rather than take a competitive approach to relationships, as the culture teaches, they accept that men are men and that women are women. And that makes all the difference. Whether you're single and mapping out your life, or you're divorced or unhappily married, women who win at love will permanently alter the way you view men in marriage. You will learn the 8 dating rules that lead to marriage, why super successful women struggle in love, what men want and what women want, hint, they're not the same, why love alone is not a reason to get married, how to avoid the green grass syndrome, and why acting like a man lands women in a ditch. Women Who Win at Love is an in-depth examination of modern dating and marriage and a wake-up call for women at every stage of life. So go to Amazon.com and type in Women Who Win at Love and get ready for your life to change. Welcome back to the Suzanne Venker Show. You can find out more at SuzanneVenker.com. This program is brought to you by Hair Saloon for Men Against the Grain. Visit hairsaloon.com. We're talking today with Joy Pullmann, author and executive editor at The Federalist, as well as a mother of 5, about how women set themselves up for failure by following the feminist life script. So everything that you're saying, Joy, needless to say, I completely agree with, and I can feel your passion because you're in the thick of it. You've got 5 kids, 9 and under, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, and that's just, oh my lordy. I mean, it's so many emotions, right? And to have stepped into that world not knowing prior to it how much it was going to change your life. I feel how passionate you feel about not having been sort of forewarned so that you could think differently about it and map out your life differently. One of the things that I struggle with, and maybe you have a suggestion here, is what are your suggestion for the idea that when you first, if you were to tell young people this in their early 20s, let's say, do you feel like they're receptive then and would hear it? Because I get a lot of people who say, gosh, Suzanne, if I just heard about you 15 years ago, my life would be so different. And so they're so receptive at 35, but I'm not sure they're as receptive at 20. What are your thoughts on that?
That's actually, so far that's been mostly my experience too. I have absolutely had, young women come up and talk to me and say, thank you for telling me this. Because I've spoken to a number of, especially college age groups. But you're absolutely, I've also gotten a lot of hostility, from women. It make me, because if, again, I was there and I would have probably been hostile to this when I was in their seat, right? I've been 20, the A student who's got a bright future ahead, who's going to go out into the world and, kick tail, make a name for herself. I was there. And if someone had told me, actually what you're really going to want in 15 years is nothing more than to hold a baby and to have a more meaningful life, and that an office, no matter what that office is, even if it's going on Fox News all the time. Anyway, I would have never believed it. I wouldn't have believed it, which is really sad. And so, again, I got lucky with an unplanned pregnancy. I don't necessarily recommend that.
As a married woman, you got lucky with it. And that's important, of course, to add.
Right. It wouldn't have been lucky if I had not been married.
No.
It would have been terrible.
Right.
That's a hard one, to shake, because I can totally sympathize with a young woman in that situation and how she's feeling. And I'm basically saying to her, you've got to take my word for it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
It's not just my word, it's my experience. Right. Mm-hmm. And I am trying to save you heartache. And it's not just me saying heartache. It is a bunch of your older sisters who are in the same age range as I am. It's you, Suzanne. It's the ladies you have on your program. It's these women who regret and wish they could go back 20 years and, dial back the clock, and they can't. And they're coming out and they've been saying, listen to us. You don't want to be me. You don't think it can happen to you, but look, it can happen. And there have been other messages that talked about that young people have adopted. So, for example, teenagers today are having a lot less premarital sex than they used to. And part of that is just being screen addicted in pornography, but also part of that is risk aversion. The sorts of thoughtful, put together, young ladies we're talking to know what an unplanned pregnancy would do to their plans, and they avoid it on purpose.
This has just been a great conversation, Joy. Where can people find out more about your work?
I think, the best place, is if you just go to the Federalist, you can find my work there. You can type my name into the search bar.
Awesome. Thank you, Joy. This has just been great. I really appreciate your coming on. It's been a pleasure. My guest today was Joy Pullmann, author and executive editor at the Federalist, as well as a mother of 5. Well, that wraps up another edition of the Suzanne Venker Show. Don't forget to tune in next time when we talk with Heather McDonald, a New York Times best-selling author and frequent guest on Tucker Carlson, about the breakdown of marriage and the crisis of father-absent homes. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and please do take 1 minute to give us your review. It really helps. And if you have a comment or question, you can email Suzanne at thesuzannevenkershow.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great weekend.